When we think of ancient democracy, our minds usually jump straight to ancient Greece, right? But what if I told you that one of humanity's oldest experiments in self-governance wasn't in Europe at all, but was hidden away in the mountains of the Horn of Africa, surviving for nearly 3,000 years? See, this is a part of the world known for its powerful, centralized kingdoms, empires that rose and fell over the centuries. But while all that was happening, one community, the Arab people, held on to a completely different way of running things. It's a story that honestly challenges everything we think we know about the political history of the region. So what are we talking about here? Well, at the heart of it all is something called the Ona system. This isn't some imported idea. It's a homegrown, egalitarian form of democracy where the final say doesn't belong to a king, but to the people themselves gathered in an assembly. Which, of course, raises the huge question, where on earth did something like this come from? All right, so to even begin to understand its origins, we first have to look at what made this mountain democracy so incredibly unique in a land of empires. So, check this out. Before 1935, the Irab were basically running their own show, completely autonomous. Their leader, the Ona, wasn't born into power. He was elected. The real authority, it was with the public assembly. They even had their own independent courts that handled everything, and I mean everything, up to and including murder, without answering to any outside king. And get this, even when powerful warlords rose up in the 1800s, the Irab negotiated a deal. They'd pay a token tax, but in return, they demanded zero interference in their internal affairs. They were fiercely protective of their system. And that brings us right back to the central mystery. In a region defined by top-down feudal power, how did this pocket of bottom-up democracy even come to be? And how did it survive for so long? Well, the answer, it turns out, might be much, much older than anyone ever thought. To find the answer, we have to become archaeologists for a minute. We have to dig into the past, because the clues, they're literally buried in the ground, an ancient echo of this very system. So, just a few decades ago, archaeologists on the Asmara Plateau in modern-day Eritrea uncovered something remarkable, a widespread culture of settled farming communities that flourished over 2,500 years ago. And the name they gave to this discovery? The ancient Ona culture. And this is where it gets really fascinating. When archaeologists looked at these ancient sites, they noticed what wasn't there. No palaces, no grand temples, no inscriptions glorifying kings. None of the usual signs of a kingdom. Instead, the way the settlements were laid out suggests a society that was non-hierarchical, egalitarian. It points to a totally different path of development, one not based on kings and empires, but on community and consensus. And here is the absolute kicker. You have an ancient egalitarian culture that archaeologists named Ona. And then, just south of there, you have this modern, democratic political system also called Ona. Now, is that just a wild coincidence? Or is that the clue, the thread, that connects a modern people all the way back to a civilization from the first millennium BC? This all leads to an absolutely incredible hypothesis, that the Irab system didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's not an invention, it's a survival. The theory goes like this. As powerful, centralized states began to dominate the highlands, remnants of this older, egalitarian old Roa way of life retreated into the strategic safety of the rugged Irobe Mountains. And there, shielded by geography, it was preserved, becoming a living fossil of a much more ancient form of governance. And this chart just lays out the clash of philosophies perfectly. On one side, you have the Ona system, bottom up, decentralized, with elected leaders. On the other, the dominant feudal system, top-down, hierarchical, with all the power flowing from a single monarch. For centuries, these two completely different ideas existed right next to each other in a really delicate balance. But in the last century, that balance has been completely shattered. This ancient inheritance is now facing nothing less than an existential crisis. And this timeline shows just how fast this ancient system started to collapse. The beginning of the end was really the Italian invasion in 1935, but the pace accelerated dramatically at the end of the 20th century, as war, a controversial border ruling, and then renewed conflict pushed the Irab people and their unique heritage to the absolute brink. The first huge blow came in 2002. A border commission made a decision that handed over a massive portion of historical Irab territory to Eritrea. Instantly, a line on a map cut right through their homeland, splitting families, clans, and whole communities between two different countries. And then came the second blow. What was left of Arab land inside Ethiopia was then broken up internally, carved up and attached to different administrative zones. This fragmented the community even further, essentially making them a minority everywhere and speeding up their assimilation into other groups. So what you're seeing here isn't just a border dispute. It is the systematic dismantling of a people's homeland, and with it, the potential death of a political and cultural system that may be thousands of years old. And why this matters to all of us is that we risk losing more than just one group's heritage. We risk losing a key to understanding the deep indigenous roots of democratic thought in Africa itself. And that leaves us with this final urgent question. The connection between the Irob Ona and the ancient Ona culture is a stunning possibility. But just as we're beginning to understand this incredible story of democratic survival, we may be witnessing its final chapter. Are we about to lose a living fossil, a direct link to one of humanity's most ancient and resilient democratic traditions?